Coming up on show 696, fancy adding $2 billion to your bank account balance in just half an hour? I'll tell you how Tesla did it. Stick around. Also on the podcast today, a big energy company buys a big charging network. Why 2020 started with an EV bang in Italy. And Ford's Mustang, the Mach-E, debuts in Europe. Those stories and much more coming up on show 696. Well, good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're listening in the world. Welcome to EV News Daily. I've been saying that for almost 700 shows. Number 700. It's just a couple of days away. But today, though, Thursday, 13th of February. My name is Martyn Lee, and I go through every EV story to save you time. Back from my travels, actually back home and back in the recording studio at home. And good to be back home. I'm a bit of a creature of habit, actually. I do like my routine and been travelling for a couple of days. The Move conference in London, in case anyone was interested in where I was. If you haven't caught up on previous podcasts, it meant that I get to catch up with a few friends in this kind of EV space, and Saturday special this week will be another very, very interesting look at the Chinese market from many different angles. Something that I know I'm guilty, don't know about you, but I'm guilty of sometimes forgetting just how huge China is for EVs, what it means for China and the rest of us. And somebody who knows that market better than just about anybody else gave me half an hour of his time over lunch this week, and so I'm going to edit that up into a little Saturday special, and that'll be on the podcast this weekend. Well, thank you as always to myev.com for helping to make the show. It's a marketplace for learning and buying and selling all about EVs and cars with plug sockets, totally free in the USA. Check out myev.com. And I want to say a very quick welcome to some new Patreon supporters, and actually, this is quite rare, a new Patreon partner. It's a really high level to support at. I'm blown away when anyone does this. I don't know why. No one kind of shares why they put their hand in their pocket and support at such a level. But Bob Boothby, Bob, thank you so much. Maybe this show is important to you. Maybe it's helped you learn about EVs and you've bought one along the way. I know that's happened to a few people, and some people want to repay that and just do a bit of Patreon support and say thank you. I don't know what Bob's reason is, but he's a new partner of the show, and that's amazing. Thank you, Bob. New executive producer as well, HEDLEY. Now, WRIGHT joined up a couple of days ago, along with John. Now, John C. Solar joined up at exec producer level, so I'll put both your names in the show notes at the bottom. And hello to new producers as well. Been a busy week for Patreon. New producer Stephen C. Davies. Thank you. And also a new producer, JAIE. I've got hopefully all your names correct. If not, let me know. I'll fix it. So Tesla today announced plans to raise $2 billion in a stock offering, tapping into an astronomical jump in the share price over the past few months. Weeks, really, and reversing their often stated policy of avoiding sales of new shares, says Reuters.com. Well, Tesla today said it would offer 2.65 million shares, of which Elon will buy up to 10 million of them, and the board member and Oracle co-founder Larry Ellison purchasing $1 million of them. Elon has repeatedly assured investors that they won't be doing this, and the ramp-up of its China production and construction of the European Gigafactory, Giga Berlin, as he wants us to call it, didn't need them raising funds. Since the last capital raise, Tesla's built a $2 billion factory in Shanghai and unveiled the Cybertruck. Kind of interesting, they spent $2 billion on building Giga Shanghai, and in about half an hour today, they managed to raise over $2 billion. They basically raised enough money to build a gigafactory, in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee before it goes cold. That is very impressive. But it's interesting. Elon Musk 14 days ago said this, and I quote, "So in the light of that, it doesn't make sense to raise money because we expect to generate cash despite this growth level. Diluting the company to pay down debt doesn't sound like a wise move," end quote. Tesla has something like $12 or $14 billion in debt at the last count, and so this money won't be going to that, but it'll be used for operations, and you would think that there's plenty of things they can spend the money on, roadsters and semi-trucks and Cybertrucks more like. Wedbush analyst Dan Ives said this, and I quote, "In our opinion, the size of the offering is larger than many had anticipated, but we believe it's a smart move by Musk and the board to take advantage of being back in a position of strength." Yahoo Finance said that Tesla doesn't report sales by region or breakdown of revenue by country until they have to for what are called regulatory filings. Now, they've had to do that today. It follows the earnings report, so the earnings and on the call we don't get to find out how they've done, but then they have to do some regulatory stuff a couple of weeks later, and that day is today, and so now we get to find out how they've done. The company just announced revenues rose 70, revenues up 70% in China. Revenues up 65% in the Netherlands. Revenues up 48% in Norway last year. But in the US, which is by far and away its biggest market, revenues down 15%, $12.65 billion. Tesla also had to reveal they have 48,016 full-time employees at the end of the year, which is down from 48,817 a year earlier. So, interesting stuff in that, and they've now got a bit of extra money in the bank to go and make more fantastic cars that we all get excited about. Well, another big deal was done today, but not $2 billion, but certainly over 100 million is what the consensus seems to be. The French government, the French state, actually, the French state ultimately owns the energy company EDF, Electricité de France, and they are a big energy supplier here in Great Britain. They have about 6 million, just under 6 million connections and customers. They have just bought the charging network PodPoint, one of my favourites, actually. And they've now formed a joint venture with Legal and General Capital. So PodPoint, another big charging network, just as happened to ChargeMaster, although that was, in fairness, publicly traded a couple of years ago. Maybe that was when BP bought them for just slightly more than this deal, actually. And then a couple of years later, now another big energy company getting into the charging business. PodPoint had this to say today: "This acquisition will help us achieve our vision of a world where travel doesn't damage the earth. By joining up with EDF, we can accelerate our rollout of charging infrastructure, making it even easier for UK drivers to go electric. PodPoint's charging solutions become part of their EDF market-leading EV offers in the UK, and Legal and General will take a stake in the new company as well." The website The Energist noted that while parts of the power industry, including National Grid, the people that actually make sure that the power gets to the places that it should do, they believe the UK infrastructure can easily handle an EV boom without significant increase in generation capacity because of the way that it works, and baseload and charging overnight and storage and all those kind of things. EDF's UK CEO, Simone Rossi, announced a different view today. I quote, "The additional electricity demand from EVs will require urgent investments in low-carbon generation from renewables and nuclear." End quote. EDF still going big on nuclear. Of course, they have got a huge amount of money invested in nuclear in this country. And so, yeah, they're not going to be giving up on the idea of nuclear. Look, I don't personally believe it has that important part to play in the future, just because from my very simplistic layman's view of how renewables are not only getting cheaper to install, but therefore the price per kilowatt hour is just getting cheaper and cheaper all the time. You compare that to what we've promised to pay, we the consumers in this country, through our government. Years ago, we promised that when EDF get round to building their new nuclear power, we'll pay them a certain price. It's just like it's a multiple of what you can now get renewable energy for. It's a really bad deal. And so, yeah, that's just from my perspective. But what do I know about nuclear energy? Nothing. I know what you're thinking is the answer. Well, the January sales are out for the Italian car market, and electric cars are up by nearly 600% in Italy over the same month last year. Well, there were 1,943 full BEVs, full battery electric vehicles sold in January in Italy, and that's not a big number by itself, but Italy's never been a very big EV market, you see, so it's starting from a small number. An epic surge over last year's number, says Clean Technica. Incentives in Italy didn't kick in until March of last year, and that pretty much paused the market during the winter months. EU emissions regulations only just came into force as well at the beginning of this year, so lots of car makers were holding back the EVs that they had. And the biggest losers in Italy, well, no prizes for guessing. Anyone that makes diesel. Diesel models, another massive drop of 23% over the same month last year. Just more and more people are realising that if you buy a diesel now, what are you going to do with it in a few years' time? Because certainly nobody will want a diesel in a few years' time. So, you know, unless you're going to get one as a company car or something, or for some stellar deal, just no one's buying diesel anymore. People have switched on. People are smart. They've seen through. They've seen, thanks to a lot of the reporting, they've seen through what's happening. No one's going to buy a diesel car now. I don't know why they're bothering to make any of them. Well, a company that has plenty of factories around the world making combustion engines, they've told us that they think the future is electric, but then in the next breath they say, but please buy our combustion cars. They need to, because that's where they make their money. Not making money off EVs at the minute, not selling any. That's Ford. And they've launched their new Mustang Mach-E electric crossover in London today as the spearhead of a drive to electrify the UK and the European markets. And they say that they can save motorists in Europe £28 million pounds a year in fuel costs if we all bought and drove the Ford EVs, which are coming, says Autocar, under the banner of Go Electric. The Mach-E is appearing on London's roads near Marble Arch ahead of the first customer deliveries. They're going to happen this year. You see, prices aren't yet official, but it's estimated to be around £42,000 to £60,000. Deliveries will start before the end of the year. The Mach-E will be launched with 2 battery pack sizes and 3 power outputs. If you go for the twin motor all-wheel drive version, the 2 packs are going to be either 75 or 99 kilowatt hours, and 0 to 60 time sub 7 seconds, estimated range of 260 for the little pack and 335 for the 99 kilowatt hour pack. So good news there from Ford getting involved in Europe, and actually really interesting that they're saying it's going to be a global launch. So the Mach-E Mustang on sale in both North America and Europe at the same time. And many people saying, actually, because of the, once again, the new emissions laws that started this year, if Ford want to carry on selling their very profitable cars that are very polluting, of course, it helps them to sell an EV because it's an offset situation. It's actually a reflection of how far Europe is ahead of the US, says Autoblog, in terms of adopting EVs because of those new CO2 emissions that are a couple of months old. Well, Ford announced it'll have 18 electrified, not pure electric, 18 electrified vehicles on the market by the end of next year at 2021. That's up from 14 at the end of this year, says Autoblog. Now, Ford didn't want to address a report that was out in CNET today that actually Norway gets the priority amongst anyone, and that all the cars will be going to Norway to begin with. All they would say, Ford said that they will be available simultaneously in the US and key European markets later this year. Yeah, that's Norway then, because nearly all the new cars in Norway are full EV. That's not favouritism, that's just good business sense. Well, the UK's planned ban on the sales of new petrol, diesel and hybrid cars could start even earlier than even earlier. Was 2040, now 2035, and the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, a Tesla Model 3 owner himself, by the way, reports to BBC News. Last week, the government sparked industry concern about bringing the date forward by 5 years, and now Grant Shapps told BBC Radio 5 Live it could happen by 2032. They're going to have a consultation with the car industry. They are not expecting the car industry to like any of this, so they're well and truly prepared for all of the excuses, all of the reasons that'll be coming out of the woodwork about why this possibly can't happen. I imagine they'll plough on, though. The SMMT is a lobby organisation. It's the trade the car trade body that all of the big automakers pay money into, and then that body is then representing them. They say that the new figure of 2035 was concerning, and they're refusing to comment on 2032. There'll be, behind closed doors, there'll be actually both publicly and behind closed doors, there will be some really high-level lobbying going on from the people that are paid to do that, so those that are funded by the car industry, but also the big car makers are going to be wheeling out, the CEOs and the chairman. They'll be schmoozing politicians and really trying to tell them, look, you'll be losing, all the usual stuff, be losing jobs, investment. I don't know. I don't know if this time they're going to have any luck doing that. Well, Tesla in China is the next story, and Tesla is seeking approval from Chinese regulators to offer a new Model 3 made in China, only for China. According to this new government document, says Automotive News Europe, the current China-made Model 3 with a standard driving range of 240 miles, that's the standard range plus, could be joined by another rear-wheel drive model. Yep, that's what we're talking about, the long-range rear-wheel drive, a car that this source wouldn't confirm. It wasn't authorised to talk about the matter, they say, and declined to be identified. But the document in China reveals the curb weight of the car is 1,745 kilos, about the same as the discontinued one that used to be on sale in the US. A 202 kilowatt electric motor, top speed of 140, that's 225 kilometres an hour. And it's the car that, if I was in the market for a Model 3, that's the one I would have gone for. It's the long-range rear-wheel drive. I don't need the performance of all-wheel drive. I'm not going to be driving in the snow. We have a couple of months of bad weather in this country, but I don't need that. I don't need the performance. I'm never going to a track with my personal car. What I want is range. Range. And if I can have a long-range rear-wheel drive Tesla Model 3, that was perfect. But they discontinued it. For China, however, they're bringing it back. Wonder if that'll change any other markets, whether that means it's maybe that is going to be coming back in other certain markets, or whether just China only. Watch this space. Daimler's CEO, Ola Källenius, this week said that meeting the 2020 and 2021 strict emissions rules in Europe is going to be a challenge, and that could mean big fines for Daimler if they don't meet the new target, says Electrek. Källenius admitted that Daimler would have a difficult time meeting these new emissions limits while speaking at their annual results news conference in Stuttgart. Well, that news follows the report in December that Mercedes-Benz is delaying deliveries of the EQC to the United States. The company confirmed it was a strategic decision in order to make all of the EQCs they can and send them to Europe, again, to help meet emissions rules and avoid these really big fines, which are coming for all the big car makers if they don't hit the new emissions rules. Okay, question of the week this week with myev.com. So I'm thinking of doing a bit of a long-distance road trip, driving either to Italy, northern Italy, near Pisa, about 1,028 miles, about a 17-hour journey, or in a couple of weeks' time when it's the Formula One second test in Barcelona, doing a Barcelona drive. Now, I'm in the south of Great Britain, in the county of Dorset, so I've got to get along anyway. I mean, I suppose I could get the boat down to France, but no, I reckon drive to the Channel Tunnel, to Calais, down through France, into either northern Italy or northern Spain. I'm thinking of doing it. So what's the longest road trip you've ever done in an EV, or would you do if you don't own one yet? And I'll read out yours on Sunday. Email me hello@evnewsdaily.com or leave a comment on the YouTube comments. Well, thank you to 234 patrons. We're up. 234 patrons who are generously supporting this podcast. If you want to know what it's all about and add your name to the list, Patreon, patreon.com/EVNewsDaily. 695 previous shows in the archive, and if you want to catch up on social, search EV News Daily. Have a wonderful day. Catch you tomorrow, and remember, there's no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.